Okay, good morning everyone, and apologies for the delay. We had a slight technical issue this end, which we've resolved. And can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Development Control Committee A at Mid-Suffolk District Council. If I can just first of all run through some of the domestic arrangements. Can I ask that your microphones are turned off when not in use? Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations while others are speaking. And if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Can I just ask you to double check your mobile phones are on silent? And can I also ask that your laptops are also, the volume is turned down so that when messages come in, they don't ping away. We'll be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please could members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. If you do hear the fire alarm sound today, please leave the building immediately via the fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exit at each end of the floor. Please do not enter the atrium. If you're in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Please do not use the stairs or the lifts. And do not re-enter the building until it is safe to do so. Okay, good. So we'll just do some introductions. So this meeting, due to some officers not being able to come into the chamber today, we have some people who are online, which we're going to trial. We have Ian Deprez, our legal officer, who is online. But in the room we have Philip Isbell, the Chief Planning Officer. We have Bradley Heffer and Elizabeth Thomas, who are the case officers who will present. Sasha Tiller, who's the Housing Enabling Officer, will be virtual. And we have all the support team around us that keeps everything ticking over. So, I'll move, and just for the benefit of members that may not have been to a planning meeting before, myself as one of the district councillors, Matthew Hicks, and my colleagues here on my left will decide the applications before us today. We may, in Mid-Suffolk, not vote on an application in our own ward. So, moving straight on to the agenda. Apologies for absence. Do we have any, please?
None received, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable or non-registrable interest by members? Councillor Humphreys.
Non-pecuniary. I'm a member of Stowmarket Town Council.
Thank you. Okay, any declarations of lobbying? I'm guessing, well, for me, it's been on the Newton Road. Yes, I don't think you need to because you're not on the committee. Sorry, declarations of interest. We'd all had emails on Newton Road. Yeah, and so that's registered. Thank you. Any declarations of personal site visits by members? None received. Thank you. Okay, so confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of June. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? No. So could I ask to have a proposer and a seconder for those? Councillor Eburn and Councillor Passmore, thank you. The Governance Officer will now conduct an electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress in your app. Thank you, Chair. That's 5 votes for and 3 abstentions. So that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on. Do we need to receive any notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme?
None received, Chair.
Okay, so we'll move straight on to the first application. We have 2 before us today. The first one is DC 20 01036 Ashes Farm, Newton Road, Stowmarket. And I'll now invite the Case Officer Bradley Heffer to introduce the application to the committee. If those following online wish to speak, if you just raise your hands in the normal way, we will be monitoring the hands up function here on our laptops to bring you in at the appropriate time. Bradley, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This first item, you're being asked to consider an outline application for the erection of up to 300 dwellings on land at Ashes Farm, Newton Road, Stowmarket. Although the application is submitted in outline and all details are reserved, the proposal does seek full planning permission for the means of vehicle access to the site, which is being taken or proposed to be taken off Newton Road. This slide shows the application site in the context of the wider area. You will note the site's position in relation to Stowmarket itself, abutting the edge of Stowmarket. You also note the line of the A14 trunk road, which goes to the north of the identified site, and Stow Upland to the northeast. This is a larger scale aerial view of the site, and it's worth noting on this plan the site is bisected by Newton Road, which runs from north to south on that plan. Other things to point out are obviously you can see that the trunk road again, larger scale, and Stow Upland Road, which leads up to Stow Upland. The other thing to point out on this slide is that this site directly abuts a site known as Diapers Farm, and we have a current full planning application on Diapers Farm. So the land to I think that is listed on page 22 in the agenda. So there is a full application on the land adjacent, which is under consideration at the present time. So just so you're aware of that, and this site we're talking about today immediately abuts that site. This is the red line application site. It's worth noting on this particular plan that the land that is currently occupied by the allotments, Newton Road allotments, is shown as being edged blue, but the allotment land is not part of the planning application site as part of the development you're being asked to consider. The access road adjacent to the allotment site, which comes out onto Newton Road, is part of the application site, but the allotment site itself, edge blue, but it's not part of this one. This is the constraints map. It looks a bit confusing at first glance, but in effect, you'll note that the two areas of land to the west of Newton Road are covered by flood zones. The area to the east of Newton Road, which is the area that is proposed to locate the residential development on, is within flood zone 1. You'll also note the brown line, which is the edge of the built-up boundary of Stowmarket, and it's also salient to point out that you have a proud public right-of-way which crosses the site across the top at this point here, and continues through the adjacent site, Diapers Farm, and out onto Stow Upland Road. The other thing I would point out, and it's noted in the report, of course, is that Ashes Farm itself is a Grade 2 listed building. As part of the consideration of development on this site over a lengthy period of time, starting with the Stowmarket Area Action Plan and subsequent production of development brief. The site we're considering today is identified as Zone 1 within that brief. The other piece of land which we are also considering as part of today for open space purposes is not within the brief itself, but the remainder of the site is in Zone 1 of the Council's brief for the site. Leading on from that, the development brief does include a concept plan which includes some high-level suggestions or recommendations on how that site could be developed. You'll note from that drawing the point of access off of Newton Road and a fairly indicative line here, or illustrative line there, of where the access through from Newton Road all the way through the site and out onto Stowmarket Road. This would be a rough line of where that would be. There's also indications on here of where density of development may be appropriate, higher density shown in the flesh tone you've got there, and lower density in the lighter tone, and also arrangement of open space. And this also picks up the use of the site on the west of Newton Road for open space, as is proposed on the piece of land to the south, which also forms part of the application site. The application you're being asked to consider today has obviously had to be cognizant of the details in the master plan, in the Council's development brief, and this plan, the illustrative master plan, accompanies the planning application. As members are aware, the illustrative status of this means that it's it's not an indication, it's an illustration of how the site could be arranged. But I think that in terms of the arrangement of development on the previous slide which you saw, which I'll quickly flick back to, just to remind you, and the details shown on this slide, which does accompany the planning application, officers considered that there's a synergy between the two in terms of the way the site would be used. I think it's worth saying at this stage, although the point of access, again, of Newton Road is something that full planning permission be sought for, what you see in terms of a road layout there is illustrative, and it's not something that you should necessarily set too much store in terms of detail, because that would fall in the reserved matters application. The other thing to point out, of course, which is one of the key considerations here, is that there has to be a link through from this site to the Diapers Farm site. That's indicated in the red line, the arrow you can see at that point there. But the intention, the clear intention of development of all of this site is having a link through from Newton Road to Stowmarket Road. As part of the planning application, there are various improvements proposed to the wider Newton Road area. This is a large-scale plan, but the following drawings hopefully can drill down to more detail on those particular elements. This is the site access that's planning permission is being sought for, full planning permission. This meets with the requirements of the Highway Authority in terms of gaining an access to serve that number of units on that land. Just point out on this particular drawing that there would be a footpath provided as part of the Bellmouth access coming into the site, and then there would be an informal crossing point, pedestrian crossing at this point, and the provision of a new footpath down towards the junction of Newton Road with Spring Row, because that's not there at the moment. And then that will lead through, this is the footpath I was just talking about here, that will lead through to Spring Row, and there will be another crossing point at this point, pedestrian crossing point, and there is an existing footpath from that point, but the proposal is to widen because at the moment it's quite narrow. So it's proposed to widen down to this point here. And then the other elements that are proposed are almost a formalisation and organisation of the parking spaces to the front. This is the allotment land, is a formalisation of the parking spaces in the highway to the front of that. And this is the access which is shown under the ownership of the applicant, which is adjacent to the allotments. The other one element I pick up on this drawing is on the far right. You'll see a footpath there. It's proposed to introduce a pedestrian crossing at that point, but widen the footpath because at the moment, again, it's quite narrow. Various views. This is leading into the site. Heading southwards along Newton Road, you clearly see the bridge, the A14 trunk road, which crosses Newton Road. Something I omitted to say in the earlier drawings is that one of the elements that would also be required as part of the highway works would be the relocation of the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit along that road, and it would actually be somewhere to the front of the bridge as you look at the photograph from its current position. So it would be the 30-mile-an-hour limit would be extended northwards, and there would also be some localised carriageway narrowing just to reduce down the speed further for cars in that area. This is generally where the main access would come just past the town sign. This is the proposed location of the new access onto Newton Road. The application plans identify that there is sufficient room within the land and the highway to provide the vision displays that are required. This is various views of the land to the west of Newton Road, which is being proposed for informal recreational purposes as part of the overall scheme. This is the land, as I said previously, recall, is within the floodplain. It's got clear ecological value or potential, but there's no proposals to actually develop this land for residential purposes. It will be left very much as it is, as an amenity resource. And that is a requirement of the development plan or the development brief that the council created. That's a smaller area of open space that would also be part of that overall open space offer. That's where the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit ends currently, which I was talking about. That will go to the other side of the bridge, which you can see in the distance. That is Ashley's Farm itself, a Grade 2 listed building you can see on the right, set in a fairly large curtilage, and there are associated farm buildings that are just out of shot to the left as you look at that photograph, which are accessed, as is the house now, via a different access coming off of Newton Road. That's a view down Newton Road. As looking south, you see the flint wall of the curtilage of the listed building. The verge you can see on the right behind there, you can't actually see it in the photograph unfortunately, is the footpath I was referring to, which is there but would be widened as part of the works. This is an interface between the site, the southern end of the site, and existing development in Newton Road, just to give you an idea of how the site would look. It's not proposed to remove any of the hedging as part of the development because it's clearly an asset. So that boundary, it's intended, would look very much as is. But again, you will note there's a footpath on the right-hand side in front of the dwellings. This is the shot showing the access onto Newton Road from the service road that basically provides access to the rear of properties in Stow Upland Road at the moment. And you'll also note the parking spaces at the front of the allotments. As part of the scheme, it's proposed to have a pedestrian crossing installed in that location there, so that there is a crossing point available. These are various views of the land looking from the south, having walked up that access view. You can see it, sorry, access road. You can see the views, it's former agricultural land. There is a fall from the A14 north end down to the Newton Road Stow Upland end, if that's the best way to describe it. So there is a fall on the land, which is obviously something that any new development would have to take into account. So there's some more views of that. That's the junction of Newton Road and Stow Upland Road, and you'll see on the left there the footpath I was referring to, which will be widened as part of the works. The other thing I hadn't mentioned, but you'll have hopefully picked up from the report, is that as part of the traffic impacts associated with this development, improvements will be required to the A1120B 1115 junction at Stow Upland. We've had various discussions with the developer of this site, the developer of the adjacent Diapers Farm site, and also the potential developer of land that's not even allocated for development in Stow Upland. It's a JLP allocation, but as we all know at this stage, that doesn't really mean anything in terms of an allocation, but we have to be mindful of that. The memorandum of understanding is that clear trigger points would be in place whereby improvements to this junction would be secured. It's likely to take the form of a roundabout junction rather than the priority junction you can see at the moment. Those works would be carried out under Section 278 of the Highways Act to the requirements of the Highway Authority and would be funded by the developers as part of their agreement. So there would be that memorandum of understanding, well, that's already been signed between the parties, and reference to it would be made within the Section 106 agreement that would be secured with us and the County Council. So it would be absolutely clear what the requirements are and when the trigger points for the provision of those works are. Again, it's worth saying that the trigger point would be across all three sites. So regardless of which site managed to start first, build rates or anything like that, there will be a clear indication that when the trigger is reached across all three sites, the works have to be commenced and completed again within another trigger period, which again is described in my report. I think that's all I need to say at this stage. The one thing I would refer members to in closing is the tabled papers. The recommendation to members has been amended slightly because, in summary, we are still looking at the amount of affordable housing provision in terms of the mix that's preferred by our strategic housing team. When this first came in, the application came in, no affordable housing was being offered, and that's been one of the reasons that it's taken quite some time to get to committee, because we've been through a viability assessment and we've established that affordable housing is achievable on site, notwithstanding the extensive mitigation package which is listed in my report, which would be part of the Section 106. But the actual details of the mix of the development to be secured, well, there's some explanatory comments underneath, but generally we still need to finally establish that mix. So if members are happy with that variation to recommendation, that would enable us to carry on those discussions. The other thing I have to point out that we did originally seek a travel plan contribution, but the travel plan officer has since advised that that can be dealt with by planning condition, albeit there'd still be a requirement for a monitoring fee. So again, that's been factored in, that change has been factored into the viability in relation to affordable housing. And the last thing, to avoid any confusion whatsoever, there is a comment in paragraph 8 of my report which refers to a junction alteration. Having checked again, this is basically within Stowmarket, and it's not something that's supported by the Highway Authority, so they're not actually asking for that to take place because they think that the issues that could be raised with regard to that junction can be tackled by changing the timing of the lights, so they wouldn't need to do what they're proposing to do. And the Highway Authority have said that they don't support that. So just to make that absolutely clear. But I think that's all I need to say at the moment, Chair.
Can I just ask the first question? Can we just go back to affordable housing? So I see in the late recommendation you're talking about the split 75-25, and the amount could be achieved on the site could be 18%. Why only 18%? I mean, the site, and what has the site down the road achieved? Because you would think the viability would be the same. I mean, there's nothing particularly complex about this site compared to the other site down in Stow Upland.
The 18% figure is based on the 75-25 split, which is the preferred figure of the housing team in relation to this particular site. Up until fairly recently, the mix was different. There was, I can't remember off the top of my head, unfortunately, but there was a different mix.
Sorry, I'm just talking about the 18%.
Yeah. But
why is it 18 and not 30?
I think it's been tested through viability, Chair, and that's what we're advised by a viability advisor is achievable on this site, whilst still...
So we're saying that, but the developer's saying 0?
No, they've agreed.
They've agreed 18.
They've agreed
okay,
those
fine, I misunderstood that, thank you. Okay, yeah, Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yeah, perhaps the sticky question probably for Mr. Isbell first. Why is it, bearing in mind that the policy, SAAP, the allocation and so on, is of the two sites of Ashes Farm and Diaper, why did we need to bring this one forward now in advance of the Diaper one being ready to come to committee? Would it therefore not have been better to look at the two at the same time so that we know we're getting what we're looking for in the policies?
Push the right button. Thank you, Chairman. So you've obviously got a development brief on this, which was prepared a few years ago, and that identifies the three zones that I think Bradley talked about. From our point of view, that gives us enough guidance to consider and report to you on the application. They are the development brief, the policies are intended to guide how this comes forward. And from our perspective, we've done the viability work to get to the bottom of the question of what can be achieved in terms of affordable housing. There's no reason why we would not take this to a conclusion at this point, because we have the information that we believe gets us to where we need to. The treatment of the total allocation in 3 steps, as it were, is anticipated in the development brief, and this is one way of achieving that.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 5 questions, so do you want me to just do 3 and come back, or...?
No, I'm to give 2 at a time, but you might as well get through them all, because you may find other people are going to ask the same questions. So.
Okay, thank you. I don't know what the name of the track is that goes behind the Stow Upland Road houses, but that's, can I just confirm that that's not being used for access, but only for walking and cycling? Has there been a discussion about having any more allotments? I don't know what the need is and whether it's oversubscribed.
Take those 2, and then come back for another 2. Do 2 at a time. Bradley.
Sorry. The track to the side of the allotments is shown as being under the ownership and control of the applicant, but it's not being proposed for any access in terms of cycling and pedestrian. There is nothing in front of us to suggest that there is a proposal to do that. The link that's being proposed is from the corner of the site where it meets the existing public right-of-way, which comes out further along Stowmarket Road. So there is a link there, but it's not coming out at that point. That's not the second part, the allotments, they haven't formed part of any discussions. It's not proposed to do anything to the allotments at all because the land is not part of the planning application. Sorry?
Not any new ones on the site?
No.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Brad. With regards to open space, it's a kind of departure from the Stowmarket Area Action Plan because it said that there should be retain a separation between Stowmarket and Stowmarket along the north side, and there's just one patch of land there. Was there any consideration to increase that area? And then a second question, the memorandum of understanding for the roundabout junction on the B1115 and A1120, if only one of the three developments goes ahead, will that junction still happen when the 75th house is met? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. The open space, the indication of arrangement of open space the illustration of the arrangement of open space is just that at the moment in terms of getting principles established on the site of where development would go. I think it's looking to establish that the advice in the SPD has been followed with regard to how the overall site works. I think that what I haven't discussed in my report, in my presentation, but it's in the report, is that from the SAP's inception and then post SPD, there's been an uplift in the number of units that's deemed appropriate for the site. So therefore that will have an impact on the amount of open space that's achievable on the site. But obviously, as part of a reserved matters application, we would look to secure as much open space that's in accordance with the arrangement within the SPD. The other thing is, with regard to the memorandum of understanding, it doesn't really matter who, if the agreement is there that the works will take place, whoever starts building is liable to them. And that's across the three sites. So if two of the sites didn't happen, then the third site, if that started, that would still create the requirement.
Thank you very much. And the fifth one, sorry, on the total housing across the two sites of Ashes Farm and Divers Farm would be 558, and that's 40% up on what the Stowmarket Area Action Plan had. Now, I understand that's in the development brief, and that, but a lot has changed since the development brief, and we've seen that with the joint local plan. So, can you just confirm why we need to, there's such a massive increase
Mr.
in
Isbell
housing?
wants to come in on that point.
Well, actually, in fairness, I just did want to point out the development brief guides us. The joint local plan is not part of the development plan. The allocation and then the development brief. The allocation is a part of the development plan. The development brief is a material consideration having been consulted upon and adopted. And that guides the delivery of all of these phases. It looks at the detail of how you bring this allocation out of the ground, and that's where the numbers are specified, and they're specified relative to degrees of sensitivity in landscape terms in part. So that's driven out of it. I'm not sure if that's an answer to your question. In relation to time and these policy documents, they're still perfectly relevant. They are still relevant to guide what we see before us this morning, because they're not been superseded by any other policy document.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, just the fact that if the overall allocation for the two sites is 400 and the development brief is a guide, that's just what I wanted a, confirmation on, as it were. Thanks.
Councillor Passmore, you were next.
Thanks, Matthew. Rachel's asked some of the questions I was going to ask, so I won't repeat those. Not in any particular order, but there's regarding this junction improvement. I suppose the answer here is, and this also applies to things like NHS contributions, we don't know exactly when this will all start and so on. Is it up to the, how do we deal with the inflationary effects of what might be required? If you look, for example, the NHS contribution, I was surprised that it was as low as it is. And this may not be a planning matter, but if this didn't start for 2 or 3 years, for example, then by the time they want to put extra facilities in, you've got up to, 700 people. Is it up to the NHS or highways to decide how much they want, or is there
I see Mr Isbell can comment on that exact point.
Perfect. Good. Thanks. That's the first one.
Yes, the potential for prices and inflation to have an effect on values is something that would usually be set out within one of the standard clauses in the section 106, so that all the figures can be indexed accordingly, so that you have a benchmark and you then adjust them according to the point in time where actually the liability occurs. And that's pretty standard practice in most section 106s.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just a couple of other things. Obviously, I was pleased with another hat on here about design out crime or secured by design. Is it possible to, that's on page 105, this may not be the right stage, but is it possible to condition that? Would that come under reserved matters or not? I mean, common sense should prevail, but that doesn't always happen, of course. In other words, is a recommendation, is that now, or is that something under reserved matters we would deal with?
I'll take that one, Councillor. I mean, you would have seen the comment we've received from the Suffolk Constabulary. I think, and perhaps I didn't make it clear enough in the report, that sort of comment can inform discussions in relation to creation of the reserved matters. So I think that whilst we can't deal with that level of detail now, but the requirements, I think that where we're able to accommodate those as part of a reserved matters scheme, then we can feed those in as part of that overall process.
If I can add to that, if it's a matter of great import to the committee, the kind of way I deal with that is to add an informative to set that out on the decision notice that the committee will expect that to be followed, if that's the committee's wish.
We're looking at the biodiversity. I think that comes under reserved matters later on. We've mentioned before things like different bird boxes, etc. There's a whole load of things there. We deal with that at the next stage for reserved matters, or do we need to say anything now?
I think that the detail would enable us to consider that properly. We've got recommended ecological conditions.
I can see that.
So I think that the detail will allow us to deal with
we
those.
don't need to discuss that today. My last one about, Matthew knows what I'm going to say with the extreme heat and water shortages and so on, about the layout and permeability of driveways and the site and so on. Again, would that be done? It's not a drainage issue, it's more about underground aquifers and not having permeable surfaces, so everything drains straight into a ditch or flows away, as opposed to getting it to percolate into the ground. Is that something to deal with now or later?
Again, in terms of the functionality of the roads, that's adopted roads would have to achieve a certain standard. Where they're not being offered for adoption, I would imagine that alternative material could be used, which is more permeable. In all cases, we'd look to secure as much permeability as we can, of course. But I think you're only being asked to consider the full planning permission for the access at the moment.
Sorry, you can consider that at a later stage. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matthew, that's all.
Thank you. Councillor Mountain.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions relating to highways and one on a completely different matter. So I'll start with the highways things, and I'll start with the one that hasn't been mentioned before. Has there been any discussion about the new path on the northern bit of Newton Road from Spring Road to the site entrance or wherever that bit of path is going. Has there been any discussion about making that wide enough to be a cycleway? And I also want to just make sure that there is a guarantee that when the diaper site comes forward, there is going to be pedestrian and cycle access to Stowmarket Road. Is that guaranteed, or is that just what you've got on a plan? That's my first pair.
The answer to the first question is no. The width of the footway has been accepted at 2 metres. We haven't had any discussions about making that wider. On the second point, the full application for diapers will enable us, or does enable us, to consider the issues of access and also how it links into this site as well, because they are seeking a full application, full planning permission. So we're able to consider those elements, and that's something that will be brought to planning committee so you can see exactly how that would work. But we're very mindful of that to try and improve the links, because that's one of the clear requirements of the SAP and also the SPD.
There's no guarantee that it'll ever happen. We can't condition it to make sure that it happens.
I wouldn't think you could put a condition on it, but as is usual with a Section 106, you've got a long list of things that are under a Section 106. And what you're talking about, I guess, you can tell me if I'm wrong, is about avoiding a ransom strip situation where you have a highway stop short of the boundary. So what you want is basically public access all the way through, which is what the allocation looks to do. I think that's something you'd put within a Section 106, and you wouldn't necessarily write the detail of it, but what you want is the confidence that that is managed. So whilst debate continues, perhaps if we give that some thought as officers, just so I understand, you're talking about making sure that there is the opportunity for public access between this zone of the allocation and the other zones, so that is not interrupted. Regardless of ownership, this is about usage. And it may well be that access is available ahead of dedication, but the point is about making sure this is available when people are living there. Is that, am I taking that correctly?
Well, it's just that we often hear about things and saying, yes, there's going to be, that's in the master plan, but there's no. I just want to make sure it is actually going to happen. Because I've just looked for the diaper site planning application and I can't find it. So cause I was going to see what the sort of plan looked like, because clearly we're not looking at the two things together, and I just want to make sure that
if you could just give that some thought, then when we
anyway,
get on to
my
debate.
other questions, one is to do with the junction improvement in Stowmarket, which I vaguely remember some time ago there was some discussion of putting a pedestrian crossing to get to the co-op, and I don't know if that's happened, and is whatever's planned there. Now, I'm very sceptical of hypothetical highway improvements, because I presume that we don't have a drawing or anything of what's going to happen, and whether it's going to be safer, better, whatever superlative you want to use for it, because it's all, someone says, yes, we'll do it.
Are you just referring to the crossing?
Well, I'm worried that whatever happens there aren't
can you
other
just explain?
plans.
Sorry, can you just explain? Are you talking about the crossing to the co-op?
Yeah, in Stowmarket, yeah.
Yes, that's already there.
That's already there. So, but it's not on the diagram. We didn't see it. I don't know how far away it's going to be from this roundabout. Is it going to affect it?
It's already there.
Is the roundabout that's going to be put there going to affect it?
The roundabout.
There's some talk about putting a roundabout on that junction. Is it going to muck up the pedestrian crossing?
Well, Bradley, come in, but
in terms of the final details of the junction itself, that is a condition of the planning permission that we would need to see those. I can't show you a plan that indicates or shows how that junction will work at the moment, and if I could, it would not be the detail you're looking for, because it's got to obviously go through safety audit and things like that. But the actual element is one of the bullet points in the report. in the suggested conditions that the Highway Authority want to see that detail, as well as the memorandum of understanding being in place. So the issues around pedestrian crossings and things like that, that can be, again, looked at as part of that detail when we're actually considering that element as a condition of the permission, if that helps.
Thanks.
Well, anyway, my final question is to do with the market housing mix. You've mentioned something about the affordable housing mix. There is enough. I know it's only an outline planning permission, but we have in some other recent outline planning permissions, we have sort of got a guideline of what the market housing mix is, and I just wondered if there'd been any anything to do with market housing mix, and whether the applicant is willing to fix that now to make it more certain for the whoever takes it on to build it, and more certain for Stowmarket and their housing needs.
The discussions have centred on the affordable housing mix, admittedly, because we've had detail, because obviously that element of it goes into the viability issues generally. But again, we're mindful of that, and we've suggested that a condition be imposed so that the actual details of the mix can form part of the reserve matters application, and that's something that colleagues in our strategic housing team will be able to advise us on as well as the affordable housing mix. So we are looking to consider that in more detail through condition, but we haven't had those level of discussions at this stage.
Councillor Field.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Firstly, I notice the site has only a single entrance for 300 houses. Most applications we seem to consider 150 or thereabouts the maximum for a single entrance. Presumably that's because of the Diapers Farm connection, but we've just essentially been told there's no guarantee that will come forward, and no guarantee it will provide any access, and I know there's no emergency access of any type into this estate. So could you comment on that, please?
I think you're right, Councillor. The point of access is a single point of access. It doesn't meet with the objection of the Highway Authority, and I think, I don't know, but I think that is on the basis, as you say, that the Diapers Farm site would have a continuation of the access leading through both sites. So there would be 2 points of access at the end, and in terms of the safety of the vehicles getting in further, getting into the site, ambulances and things. Again, that's an element that they've had to consider as part of this, and they've not advised us that they've got a problem with the arrangement that is shown. So we've relied on the advice that we've been given in relation to that aspect of it.
It seems surprising. We seem to have two things that are linked together. I can't see, if we approve this one, then to make it safe, we have to approve the Diapers Farmer application. Therefore, we're sort of factoring our judgment, are we not? It seems that there should be some clarity on that point. Just the fact that highways have made some assumptions and on that basis not raised any queries doesn't seem adequate.
Well, I think that it's clear from the development brief and the Stowmarket Area Action Plan that the achievement of a link across is important, that actually links Newton Road to Stow Upland Road, and therefore that is a requirement of development. That's something we can seek to secure. I suspect that if something came in that didn't show a link through, then we're not likely to approve it. We couldn't consider it as an appropriate development if it's not showing the means of a physical link from one side to the other.
But we will have approved this one already.
Sorry?
We will have approved this application in outline already.
So can I just follow up from John's point? So is there anything that we could condition to say that the first house can't be occupied until the link road is built through the other side?
Well, I think that in terms of the nature of the application you have before you is an outline proposal. So the difficulty is the intention to provide a link is shown on an illustrative plan, and in the supporting information it's acknowledged. We can't actually, I don't think, condition the means or the form of access because it's not, the application isn't at that stage. We're not being asked to consider a road layout as such. All we're being asked to consider is the access onto Luton Road. So I think that the intention would be that the details of the layout would include the access through to Diapers Farm, and at that point we can actually say that, you know, that whatever development takes place on this part of the site, on the Ashes Farm site, as Chair was suggesting, there'll be a trigger point within there to say that that link's got to be provided before the...
When does that come? When it comes back for reserve? When would we be able to get that condition in? So I think what people are saying is, in theory, they could just build 300 houses on this one road and not build diapers, and then we're suddenly...
They could, we would give planning permission, if we grant outline planning permission now, we grant them for up to 300 units on the site, but we're not granting anything in terms of the detail of that. So we're not, they couldn't, I think they were not in a position they could just crack on and start. They would actually have to go for the second stage of the reserved matters proposal. And at that stage, I think we're able then to consider the layout and everything.
Good, yeah, it would be good if Phil and Isabel and company officers could look at some condition that ties those things together adequately. Can I ask one other question then? I hope this is allowable. It's an issue on the viability. I note that it's difficult to see what on this site makes it impossible to deliver our policy number of affordable houses. It's 20%, is 15% or so lower than we normally accept. But one aspect is the junction with the B1215, the proposed new roundabout or whatever is comes forward, and that's costed at about 750k, and the commitment seems to be that that will go ahead however many sites are approved. So I was really looking for, is that a significant impact on viability? And if so, what's the mechanism that perhaps adjusts the number of affordable houses or whatever, should that roundabout cost be actually shared 2 or 3 ways rather than loaded entirely on one of the sites?
The viability assessment is based, or the required roundabout works and the apportionment, if that's the right word, is based on the amount of units that are being applied for. So therefore 300, the total cost of the roundabout, which is estimated, as you say, to be £750,000. The apportionment is based on the number of units that the application would seek to achieve. So in this case, up to 300. So it's a pro rata payment, which has been factored into the viability. So the cost is borne by the developer, or the 3 developers, if there are 3 developers, or if there's not, 2 developers on the site that's actually allocated. The sites are actually allocated in the local plan at this point in time, so the third one isn't. But there's 3 developers who potentially be contributing. It could be that one developer has to, well, I'd say the developer who is providing the development of 300 units pays that proportion towards the works, but the others would have to provide their elements of it. But that proportionality has been considered as part of the assessment of viability on the site.
Thank you, but that implies that if either of the other 2 developments don't go forward, then neither do the road junction improvements, because there won't be enough cash for them.
Well, I think that in any event, there will be a trigger point that's within this development within the memorandum of understanding, which is a clear requirement that these works take place when a certain level of occupancy takes place. So there will be, as far as we're concerned, sufficient weight behind that to ensure that the works do take place.
Philip, you want to come in?
Thank you. Yes, I'm a bit late to this because I had my head slightly in a related question following on from Councillor Mansell's point. Just so I understand the question here, we're talking about trying to make sure the allocation as a whole is delivered. So it's a complete package. Is that effectively what we're trying to secure by this conversation? Is that, do I have that right?
I was initially questioning the viability and whether the sharing of these costs of this particular development impacts the viability of this site and therefore the affordable delivery. I'm told no, it doesn't. The amount of money is dependent on the number of units delivered, which I understand, but I'm then seeking to be sure how can we guarantee that the road junction improvements will go through if less than the 300 houses here and whatever the number is, 250 houses on Diaper Farm, and if the Diapers Farm development does not go ahead, or the third one does not go ahead, how do we ensure there's adequate funding to get this road development implemented? Does the County Council accept the additional costs that it will have to find?
Thank you, Councillor Field. I think I understand the question now. So we're all hostage to the market with this, as we are with most developments. So there is a risk that sites stall. And I'll come back to that in a second. Obviously, the road junction improvements are only needed once you have a harm. So there has to be a timing question to this. And logically, once you get past a certain number of dwellings, you get to a point where you have foresee that the scheme will be needed to mitigate the harm that will foreseeably follow along. So there's a kind of phasing and timing question that ultimately is a matter of forecasting on the part of county highways to get to a point where what are the works that they need to do, when do they need to design them, and effectively at what point do you anticipate the direction of travel where the development takes you there. Now, you can anticipate that to some degree within the Section 106. You can never absolutely guarantee what will happen, but if a site stalls, then you would hope that you've got to a point where sufficient funds have been taken to ensure that you are planning for the mitigation before you actually get to the point. You don't allow a situation to become a problem and then mitigate it. You try to anticipate and deliver as you go. And you know, we are in a situation where if the housing market stalls, we could see the site stalled accordingly. That's not impossible. It's taken this long to get the allocation to a position where we have something to put in front of committee. I think the question of whether Zone 2 and 3 come forward, we have an application on the table. I don't see that there's any loss of heat in the housing market, but I wouldn't rule it out. So I would anticipate that this is about programming on a highways point to ensure that the contributions are received at a point in time that does not compromise viability, but makes sure funds are available in good time to anticipate the harm when it arises. So those things are important. I think within the Section 106 heads of terms that we have, and I don't have them literally in front of me, I'll need just to refer to them. I can find whichever page I've got open. I think we can probably, we have a traffic regulation order contribution as part of this, Brad, but what you described around the memorandum of understanding would need to be an additional head of term to this Section 106, presumably. So probably, if we give you some words around that and spend a little time adding to that, then we can give you some, but I would probably say, unfortunately, not absolute certainty, because we are all going to be hostage to the market. And if a site stalls, we are in a very different situation. And can I come back to Councillor Mansell's question? So Councillor Mansell had talked about the connectivity, pedestrian cycles, vehicles between sites. Again, we're dealing with two different applicants, two different owners. We have to try and make sense of this. what I would suggest as a solution is a Section 106 obligation to ensure that we have a scheme that manages the delivery of that public, pedestrian, cycle and vehicular access between this application site and what's referred to as Zone 2 and 3 in the development brief onto Stow Upland Road, so that we can ensure that, as far as possible, access is available in a phased way relative to the delivery of the development. If only part of this site is developed, I wouldn't wish to prescribe in this committee meeting at what point those triggers occur, but as we're talking, it occurs to me that it would also be sensible to have a fallback such that if the development stalls, there is some provision made to anticipate that before we've delivered 300 houses here, and that we look to achieve something so that we cannot guarantee zones 3 and zones 2 will be delivered, but what we can do is make sure that at worst, the fallback being not later than a period of time after construction ceases, that there is access available up to the boundary, at least for pedestrians and footpaths, so that those onward connections can be made. So a little bit more work needed on that, and probably to pick up Councillor Field's point, but there is a mechanism which is effectively an additional Section 106 obligation.
Thank you very much. Okay, that clears that up. I've still got lots of hands. I've got Councillor Maston, then Mayor, then Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I welcome the progress that Mr.
Can I just say we're not in debate now? It's just questions.
I welcome that's going on, and we would be interested to hear more about it, because obviously it refers back to my first question about the two sites, etc. But I'm wondering, firstly, there is a note on page 20 that strategic housing final views were not available, etc. Have we actually heard all the bits of that? Has that trickled out gradually already in what's been said about the affordables and so forth? And there was a question about the market housing. Have we had that update? But then turning to the connectivity, etc., it would really be helpful to see one map that shows us the vehicle impact points, these junctions in relation to these three sites, just to be absolutely clear where they are, so we can sort of see where the relative pressures, but also essentially the same point about the pedestrian and cycle network that will result. Because I'm quite anxious, that in the real world there are design lines.
John, it's questions,
can we see something that will show whether the path beside the allotments is going to turn into a desire line for pedestrians and cyclists or not? Because I can't get that in my head at the moment. Or is that possibly something that has to wait to reserve matters? Maybe it is, but I don't have clarity on either of those.
Okay.
I think the vehicles is now, possibly the walking is later. But
Thank you. Yes, Councillor, the current position in relation to strategic housing team is as set out on the table paper. That is their current position. Which, if you look under the background section, that basically sets out what they think is most appropriate, which is that on an 18% provision across the site, 75-25. That isn't finally established with the developer yet, hence the change in the recommendation. So we've still got to have a discussion, but that is the current position on that thing. With regard to the access, as I said, that is shown as part of the red line application site, so it's assumed to be under the ownership or control of the applicant at the time the application is made, but it's not being proposed under their plans at this stage to have any pedestrian or cycle access leading from the site down that access and onto Newton Road. What they are actually suggesting is that the access, if you could... Yeah, sorry, could you put the presentation up again, please? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I've just got to get to the right slide. Yes, this is the illustrative master plan that's submitted as part of the planning application. And the access I was just talking about there, which is shown as part of the red line, but is not, it's not actually shown as providing a footpath or a cycleway link through to Newton Road at that point. What is actually being proposed is an access through at this point of the site, which actually goes through to the public right-of-way, which leads onto Stow Upland Road. So there's indicative links or illustrative links on that particular point. The means of access to the site is up here, and on the go back to, oh, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. Yes, and I apologise for the scale, but the junction we're talking about in Stow Upland is there.
That's the memorandum of understanding junction.
Yes.
And then we're also doing works at the Newton Road, etc. roundabout, the mini roundabout.
That's approximately on this. If I go to the next one, that's a slightly larger scale.
John's correct in his where it is. That's where it is.
So just to be clear, so the cycle connection that they're actually proposing is onto an existing right of way.
That's correct. Yes.
Which is not within the red line, but it's there already.
It'll be at that point there.
So I suppose that seems reasonably satisfactory to answer my question, provided it is of an adequate width and quality. There's no proposal anywhere to improve that.
The works within the site, the application site, would be in accordance with the requirement. I think if you're saying that the works to the prow outside of the site, if there were proposed works to the prow outside of the site, they would be controllable by the Highway Authority. So they would have to control those works because they're not claiming ownership of that part of they don't own that piece of land that the prow runs through, but they want to link into it. So, yeah, if there's anything actually within that prow land, then I think that's within the remit of the Highway Authority to control.
Thank you.
But they haven't asked for the money to do anything with it.
Sorry, John.
Have they asked for any money to do anything with that right of way?
The Highway Authority?
Yeah.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mayor was next.
Thanks, Chair. Back to the B1115 and A1120, I'm afraid. The town council has identified that B road as being issues with road safety. I'm concerned that these works, the proposed works, may never come to fruition. Is there any way we can condition them earlier in the build? For example, the developer only has to provide a plan before the first occupation. You've got all the construction traffic coming in, and notwithstanding the points made by Councillor Field, I'm not really reassured by the fact that the approved highway works will be delivered at a point before the impact of the highway network becomes severe. In my 3.5 years on this committee, highways have never, to my knowledge, said anything severe, and I'm unaware of a definition of what severe is. So if we were able to condition those works prior to the start on site, we would ensure that the works would be delivered, they'd be delivered in a timely way and be able to deal with some of the construction traffic as well.
Can you give some thought to that for when we get into debate? Because I think there's a common theme here. It's that, it's the same with the footpaths. It's how we link all that up. Councillor Eburn, you wanted to come back on something?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mayor, because I was going to follow that up as well. But my other point on highways was also the traffic going along Spring Road, because my concern is that when people come out of this prior to Diapers Farm being developed, because originally we thought they'd both come together and traffic would therefore have a different way. At the moment, traffic from this site will only come out onto Newton Road, and unless they want to travel to Old Newton, they're going to go through Stowmarket Centre, basically, and potentially down Spring Row. Has there been any consideration of mitigation against congestion along Spring Road? Because that's already a very narrow road with parking all the way along one side. Thank you.
Well, I think that as I said in the report, the application is accompanied by a traffic assessment. We have relied on the advice of the Highway Authority in this case, as we normally do, and they have assessed that the Highway Authority and Highways England have assessed the information in the traffic assessment, and the elements that are proposed have not met with their objection, apart from that one junction alteration that I mentioned in my presentation. The conditions that the Highway Authority are seeking to impose as part of this application are listed within the agenda on page 71. But that element that you've just described, Councillor, has not been mentioned as an issue by them. So I'm not sure there's much more concern on that particular point.
Okay.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've got one more question, then we're going to move on. Councillor Mansell? Then we'll...
Thank you. I've got two points I'd just like to query. One is I've opened up the design and access statement, and on page 16 of the DNA, there is a sort of plan of the site which claims that that track beside the allotments has got a label on it saying 4-metre emergency access. And I just wonder whether you haven't mentioned it. Is that an emergency access or not? My other query related to Councillor Matheson's comments about the cycle pedestrian link onto the little track next to Uplands, because that track is currently a public footpath. So any cyclists coming out of this new development at that cycle pedestrian link that is proposed will then have to cycle down a public footpath, which I believe is illegal. Lots of people do it, but maybe we should put something in about upgrading that particular bit of the footpath to a bridleway status so that it's not illegal to cycle down it. Thank you.
We can hold that back again for debate. And Bradley, if you can give some thought to that.
Yes, on the emergency link, I haven't mentioned that in my report because I didn't that wasn't my understanding that that was being offered as an emergency link through. I'm looking at the illustrative plan. There's nothing on there to suggest, which is I've relied on. There's nothing to suggest that that is the case as part of that. It's just shown as land edge red. We have the applicant's agent here, so that may be something.
We can ask them that question when they come.
Interesting that it's on the DNA.
Okay.
With regard to the prow, I understand the point. There is obviously the allocation of cycleways within Stow Upland themselves, but I do take the point about that stretch linking the site to the cycleway provision in Stow Upland Road, and I think that's something again that we can consider as part of taking away on, you know, as a comment to,
we'll come back to that.
The upgrading.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. We're now going to move on. We don't have the parish or town council. No, we don't have an objector. We don't have a supporter. We have the agent. Angela Brooks. So happy to hand over to you, and if you can keep to 3 minutes, please. Over to you when you're ready.
Good morning, members. Firstly, I'd like to thank officers for the detailed report you have before you and to endorse the recommendation for approval of this application. Stowmarket is in the top tier of the settlement hierarchy, benefiting from an extensive range of services and facilities, making it the main focus for development in the district. The sustainable location of the application site, immediately adjacent to the town, meant that it was adopted in the Stowmarket Area Action Plan back in 2013. In 2016, the Council published the Ashes Farm Development Brief, confirming the site's capacity of 300 dwellings. As such, the principle of residential development of the site has been acceptable for almost 10 years. The proposed scheme will deliver a highly sustainable residential development which will have positive social, economic and environmental benefits, also assisting the Council in delivering its development plan aims. Whilst the scheme is made in outline only, the illustrative master plan demonstrates how the site can be delivered in accordance with the development brief. Economic growth will be created through construction activities, and when occupied, residents will contribute to local expenditure. Socially, the development will provide a range of homes, including affordable homes, with smaller properties as well as family housing. Pedestrian and cycle links will be provided, connecting to the existing public right-of-way. New footpaths and crossings will be created along Newton Road, providing safe and convenient access to the town centre, as well as the formalisation of 18 parking spaces along Newton Road. Additional highway upgrades, as set out earlier by Mr Heffer, will be secured, including improvements to the B1115A1120 junction at Stow Upland, mitigating impacts of the development and easing congestion. Finally, in terms of environmental benefits, the development will provide new public open space, including children's equipped play, serving both future and existing nearby residents. Areas of informal open space and sustainable drainage are proposed to the west of the site, including the retention of the existing woodland, with additional informal open space provided on the parcel of land west of Newton Road. A full suite of financial contributions for infrastructure needs have been requested and will be secured through the Section 106, including education, libraries, waste, healthcare, and towards a bus service to serve the site. In summary, officers have concluded that the application accords with the development plan and that there are no material considerations which indicate a decision should be taken contrary to their recommendation to approve. I call on you to recognise the significant merits of this sustainable scheme on an allocated site and urge you to support the proposals and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay. Questions from members? I guess the one from all of us is you would have heard the committee asking officers about the links through to the other site in terms of highways, in terms of rolling out the highways changes, in terms of footpath cycleway links. Is there anything reassuring you can give us on that, or do it'd just be interesting your thoughts?
Sure. Well, with regards to the design and access statement, which mentioned the emergency access, I think that was initially an aspiration just to provide a secondary access, but after discussion with the Highway Authority, they didn't want that to be provided, so it's actually shown as a drainage route on the updated master plan. So that deals with that point. And the Highway Authority response to the single point of access, they actually, I think that was actually in accepting irrespective of the link through. So I think we've just perhaps had a miscommunication on what the Highway Authority have said. They're happy for it to be a single point of access for the 300 unit scheme. There was negotiation on that early on in the application consideration. So they were happy with that. Obviously, this is an outline scheme, so we haven't fully detailed. We've provided an illustrative plan, but we haven't provided the full detail of how that road would link through to the adjacent site. But yes, that is in the development brief, and there's the intention to link to that site.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Mansell.
Thank you for your clarification about the emergency access on the DNA. Would you consider making the proposed path that you're going to put on the western side of Newton Road between the junction of Spring Road and the A14 bridge, would you consider making that a 3-metre wide path so that it is suitable for cycles, and that is on your, presumably that is within your red line area? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Obviously, the proposals haven't included for that. It's not something that the Highway Authority requested, so it's not been requested or required by them. That wouldn't mean to say we wouldn't, but it's just not on the table today.
So if this application is approved, is there any scope for manoeuvre? You'd say highways haven't requested it. That doesn't mean you can't do it. So will you consider it?
It's something we're not opposed to, but as I say, it's all of the highway proposals for the scheme have been assessed by the Highway Authority and
Okay.
haven't been required.
I think it's up to the committee to determine if you want to condition it or not. Okay. Yeah, Philip.
Just on that point, I don't think you could really do it with a condition, because what you're talking about is upgrading a bridleway. That's going to be a process. Okay.
Talking about the path that they're creating on the western side of Newton Road. It's currently put down as 2 metres wide, because that's what highways have said that's all they need. I'm just saying, could we have more? But the answer clearly is no.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, so we'll move on. We now have a statement from Councillor Carter, and obviously we have Councillor Muller here. Do you want to go first or second? Shall I read out Councillor Carter's comments first? Okay, so this is from Councillor Carter, who can't be here today. I wish to start by touching on the fact that this is a development on a known floodplain recognised by locals as a wildlife hotspot of sorts, and given the Council's motions on biodiversity and climate crisis, already presents precisely the type of habitat we should be seeking to improve upon and protect. As I highly endorse this and second of the objections made by Stowmarket Town Council, Stowmarket Society, and I would like to highlight the following issues. The development is on the floodplain and is as dubious as to the measures suggested to mitigate this handling the increase in flooding due to abhorrent weather, as predicted due to climate change, let alone the increased pressure of 300 properties to be placed on top. 2, the prospects of the inability of minor roads to cope with the increasing demands leads to my concern should the flood prevention measures also fail the road access. Itself being within the current floodplain could leave residents cut off from access to emergency services. The Stowmarket Society has also commented on the impact of the local amenities and infrastructure. Stow Health Doctor Surgery is already operating to capacity. Cedars Primary School was running at 98% capacity in 2019, and the newly built Grace Cook School is already fully subscribed. Only one current dentist surgery is accepting new adult NHS patients. Still is all well and good, yet we can hardly look to it to solve the problems residents are facing now, let alone with the additional strain 300 houses would undoubtedly make. Councillor Muller, over to you.
Thank you. I might be able to provide some clarification to members regarding the Dykers Farm estate. I appreciate you can't comment on that today, but it might be worthwhile mentioning this. We did have a presentation a few months ago at Stowmarket Town Council planning from the developer for that site, and they are proposing to have the road access coming halfway up the Stow Upland Road. So it would not come out at the roundabout at the junction with Mortimer Road, but halfway through, halfway up the road. And that's what we saw on the plans that were actually presented to us at that particular time. The other thing that's mentioned in the report in para 4.2, which is quite interesting, about the proposed development may be accessed by either a new or extended bus service. Well, there's very few buses at present go along Newton Road, and no buses actually go up the Stow Upland Road because all the buses actually go up Navigation Approach and Mortimer Road towards Stow Upland. So whether that will be a viable option, I'm very much doubt in that respect. Newton Road is a very narrow road and currently only has a pavement on one side of the road, as we have actually seen in the actual presentation. And as you saw also in the presentation, a lot of the residents park their vehicles outside their properties, making it even narrower. I'm particularly concerned about the junction with the B115 and the Newton Road. There's like a little mini roundabout there. That does get very congested at certain times, particularly when the crossing is closed for trains to go through. And I've witnessed this on many occasions, and it can hold up the traffic for some considerable time. So this development, with potential with 300 properties and the number of vehicles going through there, will only sort of make that situation a lot worse. However, there are some really sort of positive things with this application. I do actually fully support the 3 character areas that are mentioned in the report: the main street with a tree-lined spine route, the avenue core and overlap between the main street and the green frontage, and the green frontage reflecting the character of the surrounding landscape. And I'm also pleased to see that as many trees as possible will be retained. This is very important, obviously, with climate change, etc. I fully support a proper construction management plan for the site, so the inconvenience to current residents in Newton Road is kept to a minimum during any construction if the application is approved. But my main concern, A, is for congestion around the junction between Newton Road and the Stow Upland Road. And although not technically related to the planning application, my main concerns and severe reservations concern that Cedars Park Primary School is currently full. I understand that Stow Upland Primary School is also full. The new Grace Cook Academy, as mentioned by Councillor Carter, is also fully subscribed. The result is that children will have to travel further to school, which will, on balance of probabilities, mean more cars on the already narrow roads, causing further congestion. And believe me, it does get congested down there at that time of the day. Neither Stow Health nor Coombs Ford Surgeries have the capacity for additional growth resulting from this development. The town desperately needs new primary healthcare facilities, although even if this was built, there is a problem recruiting general practitioners, etc. And I believe there is one dentist currently taking on new NHS patients in the town. So, in conclusion, although there are some very positive aspects to this application, I have major concerns about the school and health provision, to name but 2, and in view of this, I am unable to give my support to this application. And this is the sort of message we're getting from residents, is about the healthcare, schools, etc. So that's really, really important to the residents, which I think needs to be considered. Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Just on the issue of Stow Health, I thought the analysis in our papers implies that it has still capacity.
Is it 42?
I don't remember the numbers, to be honest, without looking them up, but I just thought it said there are 2 health facilities. One of them has capacity, the other lacks capacity, and there was a small balancing number.
Yeah. The situation with Stow Health, and what we've heard in the past, they do have actual spare rooms upstairs on the top floor to accommodate up to 5 GPs. However, they just cannot recruit GPs at the moment. So at the moment, they are sort of basically at capacity.
Can I just ask a question of Bradley? So you've heard the ward member talk about primary schools, but there's a contribution of over £1.5 million just for the primary school. So do we know, is that towards new places? Is it towards extending the existing school? Do you know what that £1.5 million is for?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, the mitigation includes a setting for early years, in other words, land, which you'll have noted, but the rest of it is contributions to improve existing facilities.
Yeah. So there could be building places at existing schools? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Councillor Passman.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. I just related to what Dave was saying about healthcare. I'm actually rather concerned about this, because if you look at page, sorry, I forgot my glasses today, page 55, at paragraph 4.1, it actually says that existing GP practices do not have capacity to accommodate the additional growth. Now, I'm puzzled at what on earth the NHS is up to here, because this just doesn't make sense. And I can't see how this is all going to fit together, and this is an ongoing problem throughout the district. I know we've got to look just at this application. Yeah, but
says the capital required through developer contributions was form a proportion of the required funding to absorb the capacity and generated by this development.
so are they really saying that 172,000 quid is going to sort that all out? Because I find that extraordinary. Oh, no, I get that. That's why I raised the question earlier. But picking up on Dave's point, I mean, you're getting 700 extra residents.
If you read bullet point 6.5, in essence, it says, yes, this does meet the requirement for us to deliver.
That doesn't mean they're right, of course. And we know that with highway. And that is, seriously, I think I'm a bit concerned about that.
Councillor Eburn and Councillor Mansell, these are...
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to Councillor Muller for mentioning the buses, because I'd forgotten to raise that the highway statement says that where the nearest bus stops are. That's true, there are bus stops there, but there are no buses. So could we have confirmation of how the people on this site are going to travel by public transport and where their nearest access to a bus is? Thank you.
Yes, as Councillor Muller pointed out, there isn't a bus service that runs through, well, the site is obviously undeveloped at the moment. There's a bus service that goes up Stow Upland Road. There isn't one up Newton Road as far as I'm aware.
If I may, Chair, the buses from Stowmarket to Stow Upland go via Cedars Park.
But in terms of the, thank you for your clarification, but in terms of the requirements, it is a requirement in the SAP and also in the development brief that a bus service is provided or an existing bus service is improved in order to serve this site. The design of the main road through the site would be in order to accept a bus, and similarly on the diapers farm site. So there would be potentially bus penetration if that was attractive to a service operator. And Highway Authority have confirmed that the fund for that would enable them to look at how that service provision would take place. So we would look to make sure that there was infrastructure in place as part of that. The way the site works, as I say, in terms of detail, would be looked at the reserved matters stage, but through this, at this level, we can actually secure a contribution, a pro rata contribution to that required service.
We're not going to get any beyond that, I don't think. Yeah.
So you're saying we could require a contribution to get an actual bus, because at the moment the distance from the site to be able to physically get on a bus, it would be, I don't know how many metres, 500 metres at least? More than that, 700 metres?
Yeah,
so you're not...
I'm not able to give, sorry, Councillor, I'm not able to give you details of the service provision. I'm not able to do that because what the county have asked for is a contribution in order for them to actually look at that service provision themselves. We did consider at one point whether it be appropriate for the developer to, in effect, buy a service, similarly with the Diapers Farm site, but the county were clear that they wanted the contribution, so we've looked to pursue that on their behalf.
Thanks. Councillor Mansell, you know.
I just want to clarify, whilst we're discussing all of these sums of money that various infrastructure providers have asked for, that this is all coming out of Section 106 because this is in Stowmarket and there is no CIL. Is that, am I correct there? All these contributions that we're talking about for the infrastructure providers, they are coming out of a Section 106 agreement and there is no CIL because this is in Stowmarket. Can you just confirm that is the case?
That is correct, yep. There is no CIL payable on this site at present.
Councillor Humphreys.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And so just for clarification, this will bring money towards a possible bus There's no guarantee of it. They'll just look at it. And you can't improve the current bus service because there isn't one. So there's no guarantee of a bus service at all. Isn't that true?
That all depends on the viability of the amount of housing that comes in. It's the same with every bus route in the county.
Yeah, but isn't it true? There's not guaranteed it'll be a bus service. That's correct, isn't it?
Well, as far as I can answer that question, we're securing a contribution. The requirement to secure the service would rest with the county council, and we are doing what we're being asked to do, which is basically secure a contribution to that service as part of it, which was a requirement of the development brief and the SAP. So I think what we're trying to do is in accordance with the requirements. I understand the point that's being made, and I wish I could actually sit here and say exactly how that service is going to work and what buses will be used, but I think we have to try to future-proof as much as possible in terms of at least securing some level of service, bearing in mind the overall cohort on this site is 500 and something units.
Okay, any other? Yes, Councillor Mass, and then we're going to go into debate.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Councillor Muller, when you had the presentation about the diaper site, was there any hint that there might be land kept aside for NHS provision? I mean, the access problems to Violet Hill are well known and can only get worse.
The answer to that is no.
Right, we can only look at what's before us today, John. Okay, so I'm going to move us on now to discuss debate and come to a conclusion. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too, like Councillor Miller, acknowledge this is part of the Stowmarket Area Action Plan. It was designated for development, and actually I do like certain elements of it, so I'm not totally against this. But I have to go down the transport route, to be honest with you. So if I go to the Town Council comments, it's all about really that concern about the highways and transport grounds, recognises concerns that exist in the local community about proposals, and again, wholly unsatisfactory because of detrimental effect upon the amenity of local residents, implications of road safety along the B115, the capacity of this minor road, this capacity that I want to go on to. So I'm not an expert on safety. I think highways are, and we've got to accept that. And they've brought up no safety issues, but I do need to talk about capacity. That road is narrow. It's difficult now, let alone when we've got 3 or more residents. And it's really nice that we can turn right and go to Newton. Well, what's up there? Why would people drive that way? They drive into town. The town's already massively congested from that area, coming down Stow Upland Road and Newton Road. And it's really nice that you're making improvements or proposed improvements to Stow Upland, to that junction that takes me into Stow Upland. But what about improvements to Stowmarket? That's where we actually need the required improvements. So I've got a real issue with it. And when I go into the planning document, you've already mentioned it actually, where it talks about development should only be refused, prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. All the residential cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. I come back to Councillor Mayor's point. What's the definition of severe? Because I've looked and looked and looked and I can't find it. I've got some experts in the room, so hopefully you'll have the answers to give me that definition. But I can tell you now as a resident of Stowmarket, it's already severe, in my opinion, and the opinion of many residents. And we're going to compound that now by putting another 300 residents' vehicles up and down Newton Road. I just don't get it. And I understand that if the other development came on, we have another entrance or exit or access to Stow Upland Road, that would mitigate some of this. But at the moment, it doesn't at all. It just compounds the problem. So under the national planning document, that point really, I believe, is relevant. It is a significant impact in terms of capacity and congestion. I'm not concerned with the highway safety. It says there, can it be cost effectively mitigated to an acceptable level? Well, unless you're going to widen the road, I can't see that it is. So, and I see nothing within this plan at all that would allow you to mitigate against that increased cumulative effect of capacity on those roads. And that's my point. And because of that, I can't support this, because of that cumulative effect.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate a huge amount of work has gone into this from both planners and agent and everybody involved, and that this site has been in the offing for many, many years, 15 or so, I suspect. I do have, however, a lot of concerns that I just think haven't been kind of wrapped up fully enough in terms of us, you know, getting certainty over various things. And my list includes the open space provision, particularly to the north of the site, allowing a break with Stowmarket and Stow Upland. The housing mix, you know, I'd like us to be able to put forward something about the market housing mix in terms of what Stowmarket needs, but we don't have that information. And I'm not talking affordable housing, I'm meaning the market housing. The access for pedestrians and cyclists, I mean, we can look at a map and suggest where we might want it to be, but it doesn't seem clear enough to me, or doesn't have any certainty. The lack of bus services at the moment, I can't see the travel plan contribution, or whichever contribution it is, being enough to set up, because it will be setting up a bus service. And then the sort of policy issues in terms of the changes since that we've seen in the area since the development brief was done, and particularly the changes we've seen in the area since Stowmarket Area Action Plan, because there's been a huge amount of development since, which wouldn't, you know, obviously wasn't considered at the time of either of those two documents. So I think for me, Chair, there's just a lot of uncertainty, and I just don't feel confident personally to make a decision when I've got so many outstanding questions. Thank you.
Councillor Mounts.
Thank you. I too feel like Councillor Eburn that there's just too many unknowns here. And I would just like to say that I know this application is not unique, but we yet again seem to be hostage to our colleagues in highways. And whatever they say is necessary is all we get. And I really think we ought to be doing better than the bare minimum. Now, to my mind, putting that 2-metre footpath on the side of Newton Road, when you've got the land next to it, is a missed opportunity. And okay, highways haven't asked for it, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. Time and time again, highways say, oh yes, the capacity at this junction is fine, we'll just do X, Y, Z, and we can mitigate it. And every time the locals think otherwise. Now, I'm not saying that the locals are traffic experts, but they're the ones who are there every day. And if they think, if they think there is a queue and a difficulty getting out of that junction, they know about it. And we just always seem to be hostage to highways. And I just think that we ought to be looking at things in a more strategic view. If we really, really, really want to get traffic off the road, we need to make it easier for people to walk and cycle to where they need to get to, and put buses on. And that just never seems to happen. It's always the bare minimum on the highway, and the rest of the existing residents have to put up with more traffic on an inadequate network. And I know all these things can't be solved with this one planning application, but I, like Councillor Eburn, think there are so many unknowns. It just doesn't feel like this application is ready. Recently, we've had a number of outline applications which have got quite a lot more detail about the links, about the housing mix and all that, and we haven't got any of that. There's just too many things that we're not too sure about. So I don't think I can be supporting this application.
Councillor Passmore.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Well, I've listened to what everybody's had to say, and of course the applicants in the room. I think some of these questions do need to be answered, so I wonder whether it might be suitable, and I'd be prepared to do this if I could get some support to defer the decision on this, because a heck of a lot of work has gone into this, but these are some very serious questions that do need some answers. And I think particularly on the highways, we've got a whole long list of things that we're concerned about. I know it's an outline application, but I do think we need more information on this in order to make an informed decision. We've got to work with what local people want. It isn't just about what planning inspectorates and other people, we are elected, as we all say, to represent local people. I think there may well be a way through with all this, but I do think we've got to have much more information on this. The highways, I mean, that road going up to Old Newton, I mean, I know it well. It is very narrow. It's difficult with people parking on there. Anyway, if you put 300 houses there, it's probably going to be 600 cars or 500 cars, whether people agree with it or not. We have to look at the reality. And junction improvements, maybe there's a traffic management plan or something, I don't know. But we would need to know that before we could say in principle.
So is
so
that
I'm going
to
to formally propose
due to
that
the
we
lack of
defer
information
and answer the questions.
Okay. Okay, well, that's been proposed and seconded. A couple of other people may want to speak. Councillor Field, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know whether that answers it all. I feel that this development is in accordance with a development brief, and therefore there's some considerable justification for it, and there is always a need for additional housing. So on those bases, I'm fairly happy with it. But I do, and I would say there are a number of issues always that residents raise, which are of very genuine concern, but can be solved with a bit of effort and a bit of cash. But there are issues with this development which I just don't like at all. The one that really sticks in mind is this issue of a single access serving 300 houses. I've sat in this committee and rejected developments of around 150 houses that have only a single access. And we understand that highways are assuming that certain other developments will come along that are also within the development brief, and that will resolve those problems. But that seems to be an inadequate response. We should be very clear that there's a maximum number of houses we can serve through a single access, and should additional access be provided, then we will be happy for the numbers to expand. But not just a blanket approval assuming something that is far from certain may occur. That's true of the transport, as Councillor Humphreys outlined, doing the same thing. We're making assumptions that certain facilities will be provided. They probably won't. And the issue of the junction, the road junction with the B115, is another one of those issues where we have a sort of I nearly say a make-believe solution, a solution that may occur, but highly probably won't occur, to an issue which really impacts a whole load of residents. I don't know how many times I've sat here and heard people raising the issues of congestion in Stowmarket, particularly at that junction. So I would agree with the thought that there are a number of issues which really need resolving. We need to be absolutely certain that the decision we're making is on the basis of fact, of things that will actually occur, not just imagination. Yes, there's too many uncertainties. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Passmore and Humphreys that a deferment would be a solution. Let's get these things fixed. I don't feel confident in advocating total rejection against the thought that there is a development brief with which this largely confined.
Councillor Matheson, then we'll go to the vote.
Yeah, I mean, I have a particular ownership of the Stowmarket Area Action Plan. I've been very involved in the work for several years before that was produced, and you know, it does look to doing a good quality development for the town as a whole, and so on and so on. And at the moment, as members have said, you know, this is not contributing well to that. And I would just say to those that have been expressing the concerns about the bus service and how it might or might not be provided, how was the bus service provided to the Chiltern Leys development in my ward? And the answer is by actually pinching the existing bits out of the service in order to get the same circuit time including Chiltern Lays at the expense of St Edmunds Road and Felmere Drive and somewhere else, I think. So we can't keep pinching bits of bus service and handing over the money that isn't actually delivering what's needed, which is more bus services, and that helps with the congestion issue, which I can only agree with others about.
Okay, did anyone else? Yes, Councillor Mayor.
Sorry, Chair, to delay just a little bit. I agree with it. I think the vast majority of what's been said. I think, particularly with the CCG statement, they want £172,000. I'd like to challenge these experts. We accept their word. We accept what highways say, and we have to roll over. And yet we know in all of our wards that surgeries are overprescribed, that dentistry is not available. Is there scope for us to go back and say, more information, please? 172,000. What's that? A porter cabin? You know, how will that begin to resolve the issues in our ward? Now, that may not be possible, but I do feel that we are hostages to those experts, and yet we are asked to make decisions that affect our ward members for decades to come. Thank you.
Philip, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Always enjoy the opportunity to take questions in reverse order. So, to deal with Councillor Mayor's point, we are, I mean, planners, I sometimes say planners know nothing. They only know what people tell them. And we debate things here, and you know what you know as members, and we officers say, well, this is what the technical advice is that we have. The planning process relies upon reasonable, objective advice, and if somebody had said to us, we want £5, £500, £500,000, that's what we report to you. And in conversations with other officers, it's a slippery slope for officers to start to unpick and challenge consultees and stakeholders. If we do it with one, why don't we do it with all of them? And on what basis do we do that? Now, I know you all have your own experience and might say, well, we don't agree with that advice, and certainly I hear a lot about Suffolk County Council highway aspects. I'll come back to that in a minute. But in relation to contributions, the management process of this typically is CIL. If a consultee comes to us and say, we want X amount of money, we are not the experts, they are the subject experts. For you to challenge that, we need some basis on which we would start that conversation, probably beyond simply, I think. And, you know, the situation with healthcare is complicated because GP practices are usually private businesses, so we're in a very strange situation there. And, you know, almost every application I've seen come to this committee over many recent years, public comment has been GP practice provision is inadequate. We can query it. We can certainly query these matters. However, I think both an applicant, the community, ourselves, at some point we have to rely on somebody's advice, and if the NHS are saying this, then we are not better placed without some other advisor on medical matters who knows more than we do. So that's a bit of a challenge. Councillor Mayor,
sorry. Can I come back? I don't think I'm challenging what they're saying. I just would like to know more detail. What are they proposing to spend that money on? And that hopefully will then placate my issues.
And I understand that, and we can certainly ask that question. I suspect the answer might prove to be they have a standard formula and an algorithm. We have seen that in the past for how the NHS has come up with its contributions, and it hasn't always been as sophisticated as you might hope or tailored to individual circumstances. So yes, we could do that, and if we're going to defer the application, there's no reason why we wouldn't ask the question. Can I come in on that deferral question? On that question of deferral, certainly Councillor Passmore and various members have talked about highway improvements. I missed the question, I think I missed the point of concern that Councillor Eburn raised, but just thinking about this, is the point to defer the application to check on the appropriateness of the kind of I mean, these days it's called active travel, the active travel arrangements from within through the site, so that we are comfortable as a committee that public access by cycling, walking, using public transport is satisfactory, and to do that in
an active travel plan.
Yes, yeah, and well, from within, through, all of those things, and also to look at the high works and the junction improvements, so that what we secure here is for the benefit of the whole allocation site in the Stowmarket Area Action Plan, and through the course of the debate we talked about potential management of that, and probably to go away and do that. So we come back to you with a package which actually says, as the developments come forward, this is how the parties see this happening, because this is not a conversation that involves solely this applicant, it's a conversation that involves others. There is already, as I think Brad has referred to, there's a memorandum of understanding about those highways improvements, but we are talking about trying to get comfort between different landowners over something that, well, you know, this has been a challenging site to bring forward for many years, but I'd like to check the committee.
Yeah, that's correct, but I also think the point that John's made is that we've had applications before us for 150 houses where we've been told a single point of access absolutely doesn't work, and yet you've got 300, one does. So we need a bit more explanation as to why this one works when others haven't, rather than just a map saying it's been signed off. Yeah. Councillor Humphreys, you wanted to come in as well.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So it's the cumulative effect. I can't see any sort of study in here on the cumulative effect of the traffic on Stowmarket. You talked about the Stow Upland junction, and that's relevant. But what about the other junctions, and what about the effect on the town itself? You've got a level crossing. It's already chock-a-block, and Newton Road particularly. So I'd like to know what study's been done. And also, if you can, please, for all of us, give us a definition of severe. Thank you.
If you can pick up Councillor Mansell's point around the width of the road, whether that's actually be better off being a cycleway.
Chairman, if that's part of the active travel conversation, I think the applicants heard this, officers have heard this. The other point I think I missed was Councillor Eburn referring to open space, and I wasn't quite sure what point was being talked about there.
Councillor Eburn, do you want to
trying to type something that I can then give to Claire as a wrap-up of these issues.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. But it was the fact that in the area action plan and so on, it had said the north of the site would be open space to ensure a defined area between Stowmarket and Stow Upland, and there's only a patch there, so it's just what's the qualification for that. And if I may, while I've got the mic, Chair, can I just ask, is it possible for us to consider both the Ashes Farm and the Diapers Farm site at the same meeting together? Because then, and have it, I know we're supposed to do one on its own merits, but have them so that we've got all of the information for both.
We can cover the infrastructure across that whole area.
Yeah, and then while we can all cross-reference that in our papers, and while I appreciate we've got to make a decision on one, followed by a decision on the other, whichever order they come in, at least we'll have seen all that information and be able to access it for the two sites. Thank you.
Good.
Can I take that away as a
Yeah.
Problematic to insist upon it, but if members would ask that, can you build that into what I've given you, Claire, as text?
I think, so can you get that info to Claire so that we can vote on that? Sorry, Councillor Matheson. Oh, Mansell Matheson, your hand's up. My apologies.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, two points really. You know, one is accepting what Mr. Isbell's saying about, well, we have to rely on the various advisors, or he has to, and planning department have to. You know, the public expect us to take that wider view that you know members have talked about, and we need to do that. And I think the other point is that we need the assurance that overall we are sufficiently delivering the Stowmarket Area Action Plan, and that's why the diapers point is well made again.
Thank you. Councillor Mansell.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is really all about trying to get a little bit more certainty about what is going to happen. I'm not sure if there's any scope for something about the market housing mix, which was also been mentioned. We've talked a lot about highways. Can that also be looked into as to whether there's any way of getting some certainty on market housing mix, not the viability of the affordables, whether we can have any sort of certainty on what the housing mix might be.
Okay. I think we've given plenty of homework there. And it's coming back in 4 weeks. No, Philip, over to you.
So, Chairman, if I just pick that up, what I'm hearing is that you'd like to defer for officers to review and report to committee on the following issues, and that's firstly the appropriateness of active travel arrangements from within and through the site. That includes, obviously, cycling, walking, bus, etc. Secondly, to ensure that the highway works, to report back and ensure that the highway works and junction improvements, the single access point, the emergency vehicle access and their delivery can be secured and managed for the benefit of the whole Stowmarket Area Action Plan allocation 6.13 and the development brief in a programmed way so as to ensure there is no cumulative residual highways impact on highways within the town. Thirdly, to review the appropriateness of open space provision and measures in relation to the site and its separation between Stowmarket and Stow Upland. I also picked up that members wish to see the Dyfers Farm application concurrently with reporting back of these matters. The last point I did miss, though, Chairman, so housing mix. Thank you. Thank you.
That has been proposed by Councillor Passmore, seconded by Councillor Humphreys, and we're now going to go to the vote. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress.
So you are voting for deferral on those, for those reasons? Or against deferral? No, well, I'm just explaining we're not voting for the application. It's deferral is what we're voting on, yes or no?
Thank you, members. Chair, that's 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I think we covered a lot of ground on this application, but actually it was important we did that, and it was a unanimous decision. So thank you. And
it's beneficial if we bring it back to this committee.
Yes, absolutely.
Having done 2 hours work on it.
Yeah. Okay. What I propose is we take a quick break and we come back at 5 to 12. So literally 10 minutes. 5 to 12 by this clock. I never know. I know it's slightly different to other clocks, but see you in 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back everyone. We'll now move on to the next planning application, which is DC 21-06871, land adjoining Principal's House, Stoke Road in Thorndon. Now hand over to the Case Officer Elizabeth Thomas to introduce the application to committee. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So this application follows on from a previous outline that was approved for 20 dwellings. This is reserved matters for land adjoining Principal's House, Stoke Road in Thorndon. The other thing just important to mention is this application is running simultaneous to a discharge of condition for concurrent conditions, which are mentioned within the committee report, paragraph 2.3, but also the details of those for your information only are within your tabled papers, just to help you, just to provide some reassurance that of how they're coming along. The scheme contains 35% affordable housing, which is 7 dwellings. So the application site is northwest of Thorndon settlement. The site is within the settlement boundary, but as I say, the outline's already established the principle. We're just looking at the details here today. Slightly wider view for you. So it's, as I say, northwest of Thorndon, and you've got other part of the settlement more towards the south. So that's the red line of the site. The site was a former Kerrison site, including Principal House and the former school. So the main constraints of the site are the TPO's tree preservation orders to the front of the application, and as I go through the presentation you'll see that they're unaffected by this development, but they're the main constraints of the site. I don't know if I can zoom in, hopefully you can see that, but this is the overall block plan of the site, which shows 20 dwellings, generally standard layout for this type of development, but I will zoom in. The next slide should be a bit more detailed. Yep, so this is the south of the site, which shows some of the detached dwellings and some of the semi-detached. As I say, the TPO trees to the front of the site, as you can see, they're unaffected by this. And then looking at the north of the site, again, some detached, semi-detached, but also the plots with the yellow, which are got yellow sort of dots on them, they're sheds, but they're the affordable housing. So the landscape plan will contain vegetation around the front of the dwellings, and there will be some more trees within the site. This is showing you the northern part of the site. I do apologise that I can't zoom in on that detail, but that is also on the website. Yep, and then the south of the site, again, you can see some more trees and vegetation included within the scheme. And again, those TPOs to the front of the site are unaffected there. So looking at the details of some of the 20 dwellings in the plot. So this is a market house. It's 2-storey, 4-bedroom, and it will be black pan tiles and red brick. This is another market dwelling for plot 2. Again, detached, 4-bedroom, red pan tiles and render, with a hip roof there, so you can see different design forms to give it some character. The third plot is a bungalow, 2-bedroom, and that will consist of black pan tiles and buff brick. Plot 4 is similar to plot 1, red pan tiles and red brick there. Plot 5, again another market house, red pan tiles and boarding. Plot 6, we've got black pan tiles and buff brick. Similar to plot 1 there, plot for plot 7, which is slate and render. Plot 8 will consist of red pan tiles and red brick. Plot 9, red pan tiles and render. And then these are 2 of the affordable housing, which will be for shared ownership. They're 2-bedroom semi-detached, and they'll be red pan tiles and red brick. plots 12 and 13, to 213, sorry, that's black pan tiles and buff brick, that's a market dwelling. Sorry, my clicker's gone slightly, okay. Apologies there's two duplicate slides. So 14 to 18 plots, these are affordable housings, they will be affordable rent. Red plan tiles and red brick. And plots 19 to 20 are market, and they will be red pan tiles and render. So just to give you sort of a bit of in-depth of the design, the sort of form, and just to show that there will be various character within the scheme. As you will see from the previous site plan, some of the dwellings will contain single-storey garages, and some will contain two-storey garages. It's mainly the market houses. There'll be 47 parking spaces, 6 visitor parking spaces, and 16 garages, 3 of which are double. And then these are just some images of the front of the site. So you can see those TPO trees at the front there, sort of a wider shot of them, so fairly mature and significant to the scheme. And then that's looking into the site. The other thing it's important to mention that you'll probably note from the committee report is that there was a holding objection from the LLFA with regards to this planning application. However, within your tabled papers, that holding objection has been superseded from a new comment made on the 18th by the LLFA agreeing to approve this reserve matters. But as I say, the conditions are concurrent and they're ongoing at the moment simultaneously to this application. There's also a revised recommendation for the scheme that specifically states that authority be delegated Chief Planning Officer to seek amendments to the ecology mitigations and enhancements as recommended by Place Services, and as such amendments the Chief Planner consider appropriate the SUDS basin detail and the subject thereto, that authority be delegated to the Chief Planning Officer to grant reserve matters approval subject to conditions as summarised below and those as may be deemed necessary by the Chief Planner. And that will enable us as officers to continue to do the good work with the negotiation on condition for the surface water, but also picking up the comments from ecology on the condition 21 mitigation. Thank you.
Questions? I guess you can ask. The first question is, how are we heating the houses?
Yeah, that condition, which relates to condition 14 on the outline, that's not been submitted for discharge, and that's not part of this reserve matters. That would be dealt with through the discharge of condition. Condition 14, which is specifically with regards to the sustainability element, that's not been submitted, so those details haven't been provided, but I'm sure the agent might be able to give you some indication of what they intend to submit.
Yeah, we can ask the agent when they come up. Okay, other questions? Yes, Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. You showed us lots of designs of different properties, and you said some of them were affordable and some of them were market housing. Can you just confirm that there's all of the houses meet the national space standards and that there isn't any difference in the quality of the build between the ones that you've said these are affordable and these are market? Thank you.
Yes, to my knowledge, they all meet the quality aspects, and you'll also note from the committee report that the Disability Forum have been consulted. So yes, to my knowledge, they meet the standards, yeah.
There's no difference in the sort of build process or quality of the market and the affordables?
I don't believe so, no.
I think the only thing I noticed, which I'll check with the applicant, is the affordables don't have chimneys, but the affordables don't have chimneys, but but we'll check that. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. That is my question. On the design of the housing, all of the affordables don't have chimneys, and then a couple of the market ones plus the bungalow don't have a chimney, and that to me is, you know, is there a reason why that's, you know, it's a plot, that seems to be quite a, yeah, anyway. Why do all the affordables not have chimneys and only a couple of the market housings have chimneys? That's my first question. I've got another. Okay. And there, could you just clarify for me, there seems to be some ambiguity about the access to the playing field area. Is that access confirmed and sorted for the residents on this site? Thank you.
Yes, the site plan shows, I don't know, Alicia, if you can just get if we just get the plan back up for you, there is an access through to that field. Again, apologies if that block plan wasn't clear enough on screen.
And the gates there are open gates for anyone to access. There's not a restriction or anything?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yes, I probably should have said that I have been to the site when it was in use as a conference centre a couple of times, and I think also sat on a committee on one of the earlier developments there. But I was struck that the reason for the holding objection from the Flood Authority was about the dual use, and I wondered what what is so odd about this site that the flood provision, sustainable urban drainage, etc., can't also function as most others do, and as apparently we expect them to.
Can you just comment on that?
Reason?
Yeah, sure. I think the main concern originally that the LFF, Lead Local Flood Authority, had with this was that they recognised that this scheme can provide a perfectly functioning drainage system, but within the National Planning Policy Framework there is that policy 169 that has that 4 sets of criteria, and it was the multifunctional benefits in criteria D that was the concern of the local Lead Flood Authority, whereby initially there was concerns whether it could provide the amenity and the biodiversity aspect, but as the concurrent surface water drainage condition is being negotiated at the moment, it's being found that the suds basin can be provided, and that the amenity aspect with further work can be achieved, which is another reason why the Lead Local Flood Authority have put in that additional comment within your tabled papers to say that this is now considered acceptable.
I thought they conceded the point. They haven't. You've actually delivered it, so that's great. Yes, good.
Thank you. Councillor Passmore. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on. We don't have the parish council, we don't have an objector, we don't have a supporter, but we do have the agent, Phil Cobbold. So over to you, and 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As you've heard, the principle of erecting 20 dwellings on this site has already been established by the outline planning permission granted in 2019. The site is also allocated for development in the Thorndon neighbourhood plan. This reserved matters application relates solely to the appearance, layout, scale and the landscaping of the site, so no other matters are for consideration. The layout of the proposed development follows the indicative scheme submitted with the outline application, and as you've seen, the proposed dwellings are all of a very high standard of design, reflect the Suffolk vernacular and incorporate the use of traditional materials. The scheme was evolved during the application period, with amendments being made in order to address comments made by consultees, in particular the LFFA and the Council's housing officer, and that's important because it was her comments that changed the design of the affordable homes, including the chimneys. And you'll note from the report that your planning officers are satisfied that the proposal is now acceptable in both aesthetic and technical terms. The proposed dwellings will not be reliant on fossil fuels. They'll be powered by air source heat pumps. At this point, the full extent of renewable energy has not been finalised, and this is because the scheme will be subject to the new Part L building regs, which came into play last month and which deal with renewable energy. The new building regs require, I think, a 30% improvement on the previous standards. If the requirements for the building regs requires amendments to the scheme which affect the external appearance of the dwellings, such as for solar panels, then a further Section 73 application will be submitted to vary the designs. Once the extent of the building regs requirement are known, the applicant will then submit details to discharge condition 14 of the outline planning permission, which deals specifically with renewable energy. Details of all other pre-commencement conditions have already been submitted. Scheme complies with the criteria of relevant neighbourhood policy THN3, and on that basis I trust you'll be able to support the recommendation.
Thanks very much. Questions? I've just got a quick question. Any triple parking? I couldn't see on the map.
I don't think so.
Thank you. Councillor Passmore?
Just a very quick one. Again, my favourite subject about porosity of surface water. Presumably that can all be covered in your discussions to make sure we've got maximum permeability in the development to go into groundwater. Would you be happy to do that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we're in a slightly strange situation where the LFFA have recommended approval to the reserve matters application, but require further information on the discharge of condition, even though we've submitted exactly the same information for both applications.
Councillor Lieberman.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions, if I may. Firstly, the chimney question on affordable housing. If you could just answer that.
Well, the design for the affordable housing units has changed following discussions with the housing officer. It was a completely different design initially, instead of it being a terrace. Have you got the plans of the original scheme, Elizabeth? Might be interesting. Just okay, but it was a slightly different design.
The original design will be on the website. The only what you're seeing here is the final sort of amendment that was made. Am I right, Phil? I don't think the original drawings of the affordables had chimneys, did they?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think they did.
But they were slightly.
Yeah, I don't think they had chimneys originally.
I think, if I can come back then, if you know, there's consideration as to whether those, you know, we want to ensure that the housing mix is blind, as it were, and that's obviously a clear difference. So if that could be looked at. And can I just ask on the neighbourhood plan, I presume, but I'd like to confirm that you have had discussions with the neighbourhood plan group, whether that's via the parish council or the group specifically. And you mentioned about ensuring that the heating of these buildings would be air source heat, not fossil fuel. Can you confirm that, and within the points to do with sustainability and so on, that you will pick up the points that were made by the parish council on those points? Thank you.
Yes, I've not had any direct consultation with the parish council on this application. I mean, the site had already got outline planning permission and it was already an allocation. You know, we think that the scheme complies with the criteria of the relevant policy. I think it's THN3. But in terms of the renewable energy, the final renewable energy system, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation because it's not proposed at this stage because the final working drawings haven't been submitted to building regs, so we don't know what the new building regs requirements will be, which is why we may have to submit another Section 73 application if the new building regs require solar panels to be installed.
Thanks. If I can come back, because you know, on our papers, page 172, there's a variety of things that the parish council has asked for that might be covered by that. So could you assure us that you will take consideration of those? And, and within one of those also, there's the adequate pathways to the green space and ensuring that they're disability friendly. Can you just confirm that? Thank you.
Yeah, there is a direct route to the green space. So I'm just trying to find the parish council's comments.
Page 172.
Yeah, unfortunately the print off I've got hasn't got the pages numbered.
Is the second page after the appendix of the appendices?
Okay. find it in a minute. Hang on. Oh yes, here we go. So Parish Council note the draft TMP has been examined, amended and referendum, and Parish Council expect the policies contained are given significant weight.
It's a list of bullet points at the bottom saying that the Parish Council expect the developer to ensure that affordable housing is built, etc.,
Yeah.
adequate pathways provided with disability friendly, and then various points about environmentally friendly heating, electric car charging points.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of those things will be covered by the new building regs, I think. But things like the car charging points, they can be provided inside the garages. It's just the things where the new building regs affect the external appearance of the buildings, where we may have to submit another Section 73 application just to vary the designs.
So just so we're clear, the new building regs are coming in, but we don't have the detail yet, is that correct? So well, you haven't got the detail yet?
This application hasn't been submitted for building regulation approval yet.
Yeah, okay.
That normally comes after planning permission has been granted.
And the pathway, disability friendly pathway?
Yeah, there's a pathway is to be provided through to the green space. Yeah.
Do you want to come in, Elizabeth?
Yeah, just to confirm for Councillor Ebon, the original affordable housings didn't have chimneys either.
Yeah. Who's next on mine? Yes, Councillor Humphreys.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just a question. It's reference chimneys. I don't think I'd get down to this, but it's about stigma, isn't it? If you identify something as being different and the affordable housing is different, that applies a stigma potentially to the affordable housing. And that's mentioned really by the council as well in their points. And it's important we don't attach a stigma. So therefore, my question is, would it be possible to put false chimneys on the affordable housing?
I just say, I don't want to preempt anything, but Councillor Stringer's going to ask for exactly the opposite. So let's wait till we get to debate.
Or the reverse.
Let's wait till we get to debate for that subject. Councillor Matheson.
Well, I was going to ask, no one else had, whether the chimneys were actually functional or aesthetic only. It sounds like we just got that one answered, did we?
Some have chimney breasts with a chimney coming out the top, others don't.
No.
There are chimneys.
That's the clue as to which are real and which are false.
Some have chimney breasts up the side of the house, so they're real chimneys, others don't. Okay, Councillor Eburn, did you want to come back? Sorry, Councillor Mansell.
Well, I was going to say the complete opposite of Councillor Humphreys, actually. I've been looking through the plans to work out which ones need a chimney and which ones don't, and I would say I'd rather only see chimneys where they are actually got fireplaces at the bottom.
So that is a personal matter for
but
debate.
I would like to see the other chimneys all removed
Councillor
to make
Mansell,
it...
sorry, that's for debate, not for now. You're giving an opinion.
But it's already been asked.
You're giving an opinion. No opinions at this stage, please. It's points of clarification only. Councillor Matheson? You're done. Okay, we're going to move on then. Okay, so we now have a statement from the ward member who can't be here today. So I'll just read this out on behalf of Councillor Andrew Stringer. Dear all, I'll not be able to attend your meeting on the 20th of July, but it would be grateful if my thoughts as District Councillor could be read out and considered. This application is broadly in line with the recently adopted Thorndon Neighbourhood Plan, and I note the correspondence regarding the lack of open suds. This is disappointing as this village has a demand for amenity space for its residents, and many rely on other villages for some recreational activities. Moving on to the design, it is very disappointing that we continue to see false chimneys in some of the designs. Perhaps this could be looked at. I would also like the committee to double check this development will be utilising heating and energy generation opportunities that are sustainable. Many of the designs that are Suffolk character, although some quite on the larger side. However, plot 9 does not seem to be a design familiar or in keeping with the Suffolk vernacular. Thank you for reading this out. Kind regards, Andrew Stringer. Okay, members, so that's all the information before us. Up to us to discuss, debate and come to a conclusion. Councillor Humphreys, you were first.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So going to the ward members' point about chimneys, it's interesting because He keeps on going on about the rural Suffolk outlook and design and everything else, and it's all very important. And traditionally, houses in Suffolk and everywhere else in the UK had chimneys. So the traditional look is to have chimneys. So if we continue with the chimney debate, because I've got no other issues with this at all, I've got to be honest with you. It's all about chimneys. We've already established that some of the houses require chimneys. So would it not be simpler just to make them all look the same, false or not? That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
I think we've got to be careful not to get drawn down into only talking about chimneys. I think what we need to have is a broad range across the whole site, and we're never going to, we all have different views on that, and that is not a reason to propose or refuse an application just based on the chimneys. So I'm just mindful we don't get dragged into a big discussion on chimneys.
Mr. Absolutely right, and I wasn't proposing anything, I was just discussing chimneys. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Eburn, you were next.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's nice to see, or good to see, an application that's supported by the Parish Council, and obviously it was within their neighbourhood plan and seems to meet what the neighbourhood plan has been asking for, which is good news. I'd just like to ensure that the points that the Parish Council has made are taken on board in any sort of final iterations, and that the issues about, you know, accessing SUDS as an open space area and having full access for anyone with a disability is included in the kind of final bits of design. And with regards to the affordable housing and the market housing, please can the developer consider that we want them to be well, not as similar as possible, but we want people not to have to tell the difference between the market housing and the affordable housing, however that may be. But I'd be happy to support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Matheson, you were next.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it is, as Councillor Eburn has said, it is welcome to see something that fits in with all the policies without too many sticky bits. The only thing I perhaps should have asked the agent actually, but can we have the Disability Forum's request of 50% meeting Part M42 included in the conditions?
Is that an actual requirement under the building regs? Because if it is, then it'll have to be provided anyway.
No, not well. I mean, obviously M4 is part of building regs, but what we're asking is, can we have 50% of them meeting M42, which is the part M42 is the accessible and adaptable standard. There's three standards of M4. 1, 2, 3.
Right.
Philip, can you just comment on, are we able to request that point? Well, I'm not sure if we've gone to 50%.
No, we have actually.
Have we?
Find the right button to push, Chairman. So this is a reserved matters application, it's not a planning application. I would have said that the description, what you're describing, and I think the case where we've done this before has been in relation to an outline application, not a reserved matters application. So I'm not convinced that that's a reasonable thing to do at this point in time.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Passmore.
Thanks. I don't know whether Rachel was proposing it. I'd be very happy to second the application if you were, or were you not? You are proposed. Chairman, I think it's a very good application. I think we've covered a lot of ground. It ticks all the boxes that we've spoken about, and so I'm very happy to second it.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak? So, just so that we resolve Chimneygate, am I right that the message to the developer is let's have a mix across all the housing, either some with, some without, but not just the affordables without, so that you can't tell the difference? Is that the message from the proposer? And second, then I'll bring in Councillor Matt.
From a proposer perspective, I would like to see as absolute minimal difference between affordable housing and market housing. And personally, if it's a workable chimney and it's got a great chimney breast, then it look fantastic with a chimney on it. Otherwise, I don't particularly see the need for chimneys. But I think we can't design them sitting here, but that would be, if I was, that would be my view. But the main point is that there should not be a difference between the affordables and the market housing.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Mayor, you want to come in?
Yeah, the point about chimneys that Councillor Stringer makes on a regular basis, if you have a false chimney, it's guaranteed for 10 years. The roof is guaranteed for a lot longer. So actually, by putting false chimneys in, you are potentially causing an issue for residents. So I support the proposal. If you need a chimney because there's a fire at the bottom of it, fantastic. Otherwise, why put in something that's not required?
Anyone else wish to come in? No? Okay, so we'll go to the vote then, I think. Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Okay, thank you, Councillor Mayor, yes.
Can I go on? 4.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 8 votes for, that's unanimous.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. Do we have any site inspection requests needed to be reported to the committee?
No, Chair.
Okay, so I now formally close the meeting at 12:26. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance today.